everyone, and welcome back to the Stitch Sessions. In this week's tutorial, we're going to be working on this really beautiful braided ear warmer. And what's really cool about this ear warmer, unlike a messy bun hat, which you still kind of have to pull over your head, if you've got a bit of an updo or something you really want to be careful not to displace, we're designing this ear warmer to actually be fastenable, that's not a word, so that you can fasten it. So instead of having to like pull it down over your head, we designed it so that you can create your ear warmer and then just fasten off in the back. And so it won't disturb your hairdo. Now it looks super intricate, but it's really easy to do. We're basically crocheting 3 strips so that we can then create our braid. And so I'm sure you've seen many braided projects out there using 5-stranded braids or 4-stranded braids. Generally they're called a Celtic knot, I believe. Super beautiful, very pretty. I just wanted to keep it very simple. Most people know how to do a 3-strand braid. And at the end of the tutorial, stay tuned, because there's a little bonus footage, we'll say, on how to create this edging that just gives it a little bit of what I feel is like a vintage feel, because you can keep it really nice and plain. And I'm just gonna put up a little clip of the braided ear warmer without the trim, and it looks just as beautiful. So if you want to keep it super simple, you can leave it without the trim. I did add the trim, and I just feel like it gives it that kind of, I don't know, Bing Crosby White Christmas kind of feel. And it's really nice and cushy, and it fits perfectly around the ear to keep it nice and warm. And I love how the strap on the back just, again, gives you perfect access to secure it on you, and it's not going to disturb your hairdo. That's the main thing with using these ear warmers. So exciting. You won't believe how easy this really is to make. So without further ado, let's get all of our materials together and let's get stitching up our braided ear warmer. All right, so here are the materials you're going to need to make your ear warmer. Super simple. For my yarn, I'm using this beautiful chunky yarn, and it's by Bernat Soft Chunky, or Softy Chunky, I should say. And it's some leftover yarn that I had from another project. You will not need a lot, so 1 skein of this is plenty. Or if you want to make your braid in 3 different colors, you can pick up a couple of skeins. So just so that you know, now this label belongs to a different color, but it is the same yarn. And it, like I said, Bernat Softy Chunky. And it is considered a super bulky 6, which is perfect for something like an ear warmer, okay? And for the hook size, it recommends an 8mm hook, but I'm going to be using a 9mm hook for this project, also known as a size N. Now, 9mm hooks are really unusual. This is like a hook that my mom found from when I was a teenager. So I don't even know if they make the 9mm anymore. I'm sure they do. They're just not as common to find in stores. If you do not have a 9mm, certainly you can use an 8mm hook, which is what they recommend for this yarn. Or if you want to go up a hook size, you can go up to a 10mm, which is also a very common hook size. Just because it's a bulky yarn and I wanted the stitches to sit nice and relaxed. And especially if you're a tight crocheter, I would recommend going up a hook size, okay? But an 8 or a 10mm will do just fine. As always, you want to make sure that you always have a trusty pair of scissors and a handy darning needle to sew in your ends. You will need a couple little buttons to be able to fasten on your ear warmer. And always have a measuring tape on hand when you're doing projects like this that are customizable. And once you've got all these materials together, let's get started. So a typical braid will use 3 strands. So if you ever braided your hair in the traditional 3 strands. Now you may see other braids out there that use 4 strands. Generally that's known as a, I believe it's like a Celtic knot, which is also really, really pretty too. I've seen these braided effects done with 5 strands. But I'm gonna go and use the traditional 3 strands. So what we have to do is create 3 strands of fabric. So I've already got 2 of mine done already. And so it's just really nice and simple like that. It's just 2 rows. And we're just using half double crochets. And then what you're gonna do is you want 2 strands that are the same length. And then you want a 3rd strand that's a little bit longer. And so that's what I'm gonna show you. Both are, all of them are done the exact same way. Now, one thing you want to be aware of is the circumference of your head. So for an average female adult, for example, it's usually around 21 to 22 inches or 54 to 56 centimeters. Okay, so I made these strips just a little less. So mine are about 19 inches or 48 and a half centimeters. And you always want to make it a little less because fabric will stretch. You see, it's got a lot of stretch. And over time through washes and wears and things like that. So you don't want to make it exactly at the measurement. Otherwise, it just stretches out and then it doesn't fit you at all. So I always take an inch or 2 off. So 2 of my strands are 19 inches. And then the 3rd strip, I'm going to add a couple of inches on top of that. So what you want to do to begin your first 2 strands, we are going to start with a starting chain of 50 chains. So 2 of them are 50 chains. And the 3rd one I'm going to make will have 60 chains. But these are all done the exact same way. So I happen to be doing the one with 60 chains now. And if you're starting with your first 2 shorter ones, they will start with 50 chains, okay? So we're going to begin by placing a slip knot on our hook. Just like that. And then you're going to proceed to create your initial foundation chain row. So as I said, if you're creating your 2 short ones, you start with 50 chains. And I am now doing my longer one, so I'm going to do 60 chains. Okay, so I have done my 60 chains. You may be starting with your 50. The other thing I wanted to say about the circumference, because we're going to be braiding this, even though you have, like I have 19 inches, for example, when you braid it, it will also shorten the length of your braid. So keep that in mind, and that is why we're doing another long piece, and that's going to be the piece that we fasten around our head. Okay, so once you've reached your chain length, you want to add an additional 2. So if you're starting off with your 50 chains, you're going to do 50 plus 2. If you're now doing your long chain, you're going to do 60 plus 2. So I'm adding an additional 2 chains. Okay, just like that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to find the 4th chain from the hook. Remember, we don't count the one that's on the hook. So we go 1, 2, 3, and 4. And into that 4th chain, we're going to do a half double crochet. Now, for this project, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work into the back bumps of my chain. And it's just to give it a nice finishing edge, okay? If you're uncomfortable doing that, just go directly into the chain. There's no problem. So you're going to yarn over, and you're just going to, you might need to help it along into the back bump there. Pull through, and then you'll yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. And there you've created your first half double crochet stitch. Okay, and then this chain 2 and the 3rd chain on the bottom, that will represent a half double crochet. So we do count that as a stitch. Okay, and that's basically all you're going to do all the way down your chain until you reach the end of your chain, and you should still end up with 60 stitches. So if you're starting off with your long one and you're starting off along with me, you can do your long one first and your shorter ones after. Okay, so 60 stitches you should still have at the very, very end. So pause the video, finish your chain, and I'll meet up with you when you're down to your last stitch. Okay, so once you have done 1/2 double crochet into each chain, your work will look something like this. And as you can see, because I worked into the back bumps, just creates this beautiful finished edge. So it's just really nice. I love how that works out. Okay, so all we have to do is one more row. So really, really quick project and so deceptively easy. So when you see that braided finished product, it looks really complicated, but it's actually fairly easy and very quick. So if you're wanting to whip these up for some gifts, this is a great one to do at the last minute. Okay, so you've come to the end of your row. So you're going to chain 1 and turn your work. Okay, so the back of your work looks something like that. And now we're going to continue doing 1/2 double crochets, but we're going to work into the back loops only. Okay, so if you turn your stitches so that you see the top of them, you see the V's. The loops closest to you are the front loops, and the loops furthest away are known as the back loops. Okay, and so we're going to work right away 1/2 double crochet into the very first stitch. So this chain 1 does not count as anything. You're going to go right away into that very first stitch in the back loop only, keeping it relaxed, and you're going to 1/2 double crochet. Okay, that's what you're going to do for every single stitch all the way to the end, basically. So back loop only, 1/2 double crochet, and again, back loop only, 1/2 double crochet. Okay, and what that does is it pushes the front loop along with this bottom side edge forward to give that really neat braided look. So if I show you this strip I've done already here, you can see we work this second row into the back loops only, and it just kind of pushes the side V's forward, just creating a really beautiful texture. Super simple way, a super simple technique to create texture. And it looks complicated. That's the beauty of this. Okay, so again, really easy. Finish your row 2, and I'll meet you at the end. Okay, guys, so this is my last official stitch. And you want to keep in mind that chain 2 that we had at the beginning, that does count as a stitch. So it's easy to kind of think that you're done, but there's this little bump here. So you want to make sure that you go into the very top of that chain 2 for your last 1/2 double crochet. And by the way, if you're ever uncertain and you're not quite sure, just work backwards and make sure you have the proper number of stitches. So I know that I need to have 60 stitches. So if I only had 59, then I would know for sure I'd have to go into that. And that is it. So that is the strip finished. It's only 2 rows. So I'm just going to snip my yarn, and you don't really need to leave a super long tail or anything. You're just going to snip it off and then just pull it through just like that. Okay. And again, bulky yarn I would recommend definitely for this project because it works up quickly and fairly thick. If you're using like a medium 4-weight yarn, you might have to do 3 rows. So it's just the difference in how the size will turn out. Okay, so I finished my first strip, or for you, it might be your first strip, which is 60 chains to start plus 2. You will now need to repeat this process for 2 more strips, and your second strips should have 50 chains to start plus 2. 2 strips at 50 chains to start, 1 strip at 60 chains. Once you've finished your 3 strips, meet me back here and we are ready to begin the braiding. Okay, so before we actually start braiding, what we want to do is we want to take our 2 shorter strands. So just double check there. Okay, so that was my longer strand, so I'm just going to set that aside here. what I want to do is I want to take my 2 shorter strands and I actually want them, I want to just sew the tops together. And that's why I said you don't need a super long tail, but just enough that you can, I mean, even that one's pretty easy because it's just a 2-row project. The thing you do want to keep in mind is you want the front sides of your strands to face up. And so remember, the front sides are the ones that created that texture with the little braided look. If I turn that over, see, it's got a completely different texture. So that's the back. So I want to keep the top 2 facing the front. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 of my ends here and I'm just going to put both right sides facing up and I'm going to place them one on top of the other. And using my tails, I'm just going to sew the very edge together. And you'll see why in a moment when we reintroduce our 3rd strand. So you can, it's up to you. You can use both strands to sew this in. Or you can just use one and weave the other one in. So if it's going to be less confusing, definitely take the less confusing route. So we're just going to feed that through. Make sure your darning needle can accommodate bulky yarn, by the way. Okay, so we're just going to place them together, just like that. And just going to use an easy little whip stitch here. So I'm just going to find the very edge there and go in through the edge of the other one. And pull that through. And then I'm just going to come back again. So I'm just picking up some loops. I'm trying to stay as close to the edge as possible, but still making sure that I pick up a few of these loops here. Okay, just nice like that. You want them to be fairly secure. And a few little whip stitches should do it. And then this is my chain. So I might have to naggle it through the loops. And maybe one more just at the very end there. Just like that. Okay, so now they're secured together. And what you can do is I have a little bit of tail still left. So I'm just going to weave it back the same way. And that way I can just tie it to the other. I'll show that to you really quickly. So I just came back. And now I'm just going to tie it to the other tail. Just like that, and make it extra secure. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I actually am going to leave this little tail here just because I will use this to then secure this later on to the 3rd strand. So as you can see, again, not a long tail, so you don't need much, but that's what I'm going to do there. So now be careful that you don't do that because that is now the wrong side, right? Now, just keep in mind that you want to keep your work pinched at the top like that. And now both right sides are facing up like that. And they should overlap. And this is where we're going to now bring in our longer tail. And we're going to introduce it on top. Okay. So what you want to do is your longer tail will be obviously longer than the others. So you want to kind of drape it over in the front with a little bit left over. And so the best way to do this is to just make sure that it's almost in line with the ones at the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to just leave a little bit, like there's probably 2 stitches hanging out here. So it's almost close together there. And then at the top, I want the longest section sticking out there. Okay, and I know it sounds very scientific, but that's basically how I work it out. So what I've done is I've kind of, whoops. And with that, what I want to do is I have the long part kind of draped over. So that's what I meant, that those tails will get hidden and actually will be used to secure it to here. Okay, and then the sides, I just open them up a bit. And now what I'm going to do, this is my centerpiece. If it's easier, I would recommend placing a pin here, especially if you're a little bit newer. Securing a pin there will just make your life a lot easier, okay? But I'm pretty secure in what I'm doing, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. So now I'm going to take the outside leg here, and I'm just going to curve it across the center. Now be really careful because it's going to want to do this, and you want it to sit flat. So you're going to just have to help it along. Okay, just curve it a bit. And then this is your center. And now you're going to take the other side and you're going to curve it over here. Okay, just like that. Okay, so you can help it curve a bit. So now your center is on the outside. Okay, and now what you're going to do is you're going to keep sending this one over, under. You want to send it over to the right. Now you're going to take your right and you're just going to curve it over, just like that. So see how it's creating this really pretty ridge? And you always keep sending the outside furthest over, weaving it in and under. So now this one is going to go under here. The outside is going to curve over. And again, just be really gentle. You don't want this to be too tight because remember, you want it to cover your ears, right? So you want to kind of like really help shape it, just like that. Okay, now I go to, and I just make sure it's still sitting nicely up here. And a lot of times the first one will be a bit loose, so you might just want to adjust that. And this is why having a pin here is really, really good. So that one needs to be loosened up. Just like that. Oops. Okay, now I'm going to go to my outside on the right and bring it over. Okay. And now I'm going to go to the outside on my left and bring that over. And I mean, this is just the basic principle, like a 3-strand braid. Okay, now I go to my right and I shape that over. And now I go to my left and I shape that over. Being careful. It's easy to start getting tight as you get to the end, so just be careful. Keep it nice and relaxed. Shape the right over. Shape the left over. And you're going to keep doing this right until the very end, until you can meet all the ends together. Keeping it nice and relaxed. It looks like this is going to be my last one to shape. Just like that. And what I want to do is I just want to kind of press this one down into this one. And our braid is finished. So now what we're going to do is you can whip stitch the end of this together, but I'm actually going to single crochet across. Now it's going to be tricky and I'm going to show you. But what I would recommend is most likely is to these particular ends, I would weave them in because they're just going to get really, really confusing for you. So once your braid is done, or even before your braid, the bottom ends, you should weave these in. And then hold these down. So just so you can see, this is what your braid should be looking like, okay? And you've got your long one coming out the top. That's it. See how easy it is? And it looks super complicated when you see it done. And it's so, so pretty. Love that. Okay, so let's talk about securing this end here. So I'm going to go ahead and sew these in first, and then I'll be back to do that one with you. Okay guys, so I've sewn in my ends here, and I've also gone back up and just kind of stretched and maneuvered this out, because generally what will happen is that first one's going to sit really relaxed, I guess we'll call it. I wanted to say wide, but so when we're putting it over, as we continue to braid, it's natural that it starts to tighten at the bottom. So you just want to be careful with that so that it doesn't get uneven. So that's why I went back up and just kind of repositioned and just kind of made sure there was no gaps here. See, like there's a little gap there. So I just kind of wanted to even out to make sure that it's sitting. All the braiding is sitting nice and even. And I have woven in my ends. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have the top and the bottom basically matched up together, and then I've got the middle one just sitting next to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to single crochet this end shut. So it is going to be a lot of eyeballing it really, but the main thing is you want to keep things consistent. So this is what it looks like from the back here. And so let's get our yarn here. And now why I'm doing this instead of just whip stitching it is because I want to create a little bit of a strip so that we can sew on our buttons. Okay, so you're just going to start by placing a slip knot on your hook. And again, I want to make sure that I've got the top and the bottom together, just like that. And so this is the right side facing up, so that's kind of where I want to get started. So I'm just going to, so this is my middle one here. So hopefully you guys can see that. I know red can sometimes be a little bit tricky on camera. So I'm just going to insert my hook right where that first or the last stitch, you could say, was there. And I'm going to slip stitch to join. I'm also trying to hang on to the other two so I don't lose them. And this is why if you are super new to crochet, pinning your work will definitely go a long way. So now, oops, there we go. So I've slip stitched to join. Okay, make sure I don't lose that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to chain one. It's going to feel really awkward to hang on to this way. I'm going to try and see if I can work over that tail. And I'm going to go right back into that same stitch and I'm going to single crochet. Just like that. Okay. And now I'm going to go into the next stitch, which actually should be the very next one right there because there's only 2 rows. Remember, we're working into the sides of rows right now. And we're going to just lift that up and single crochet. So now you've got more of a finished edge there. And now we've come to, whoops, see how it slipped out of my hand there? Just move that tail out of the way. So now we've come to our top and our bottom together. So we're going to continue single crocheting, but we're going to do these 2 together. Okay, and again, you will probably have to readjust it once it's done. So I'm going to insert my hook into that first stitch of this row here. And I'm going to go into the one behind it and do the same thing. And then I'm going to just pull up a loop through both of them. And I'm going to solidify it with a single crochet. There we go. So now it's attached to the middle one. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to find a spot somewhere kind of so that it doesn't look like the stitches are too far apart, but you don't want them to be too bunched in. And I kind of like this little area here where that, where we pushed that V stitch forward, where we pushed that stitch forward. So I'm going to go right in through there. And then I'm going to find the same spot in the one behind it. And I'm just going to single crochet again. Okay, so now these are just kind of what I call melting right into the work. Okay, and we've got space for one more. So I'm actually going to find underneath that very first stitch there of that row, and the same thing in the one behind it. And just gently bring it through, just like that, and single crochet. And that is my finished edge there for my braid. But now what we're going to do is we're going to chain one and we're going to turn our work. So now, just a little aside, now this end is fully secured, so I don't have to worry too much about it going anywhere. And now we're going to create a second row here. So we're going to just go right back into the same stitch here, and we're going to single crochet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to go right into where we did that chain 1 originally, which could be a little snug. And 6. Okay, so now when I turn my work, I definitely have a nice clean finished edge on that side. And I'm just going to take my buttons here. And so that is where I'm going to find a spot for these buttons. Now that will depend on the width of that strap, which we'll check out in a second. So for now, we're done with that. See, short and sweet. So what you're going to do is you are going to snip your yarn. Okay. And fasten off there. And now what you want to do is you want to weave in these ends to get rid of them. So go ahead and do that. And I'll meet back up with you to talk about securing this side here. Okay, so I've woven in my ends here. And by the way, you're probably going to look at this and go, wow, this is kind of small, but it does stretch. And actually, once you place this over your head or the head of the person you're making for, you'll see that it actually fits really, really well. It's got lots of stretch here, so no problem at all. So now let's talk about securing down our top end here. And that's why we had those little tails that are just perfect for doing that. So I'm just going to take one of them. And basically, it's going to be just like weaving in your ends. It just so happens that you're going to secure this part of your work at the same time. So here, I'm just going to kind of hold it in the place that I want. And like I said, you're going to treat it like you're just weaving in your ends. You just want to hide it inside those loops. You don't want to go all the way through to the front. So you just want to pick up some loops. Hopefully you can see that there. Just want to pick up a loop here and there and then keep coming back to the part of your work that you want to hang on to. And so there's a loop from the back part and there's one from the front. So the back part meaning the one it's sitting on. So you can see it's already securing very nicely. And again, you don't need a lot. So now I'm just going to maybe come backward. And that's what really helps to lock in your ends. It's basically kind of weaving in the fibers back and forth, and it really does lock them in there. Wow, this is a little bit tricky because of the bulky nature, I guess, of the yarn. Okay, so I can see there. See, now it's really stuck there. So I would do that a few more times. And then every once in a while, what I do is I just do something like this. I'll knot it to the other end and then keep weaving. And this sucker is going nowhere. Okay. And a little trick too, if you find like, well, how do I do that? My ends are so short. One thing I learned actually from watching another YouTuber is that I put my darning needle in first where I want it to be woven in, right? And then I thread my yarn through and it's already in place. So it just makes it really easy. So just like that. And then I pull it through. And that is how you weave ends in tight spots. Okay. So I'm just going to keep going back and forth a few more times and then I'm going to tie these together. And as you can see, whoops, see, this is now sitting very secure here. And then see how that gap is happening? I'll talk about that in a second. So just finish weaving this in, and while I'm at it, I'm going to weave this end in, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got my strands secured. I've got my ends woven in, and so you'll see that it kind of will create a little bit of a gap here. That's quite normal because, again, it's going to shift around a little bit. So I always kind of like to keep stretching it and moving it so that it all sits even. What I don't want is it to be kind of really gapey up here and then tight down there, which is normal to happen. So because of this, what some people will do is they will now go back and they will just lightly from the back is actually do a very light, I guess you would call it a whip stitching, where they will secure these strands together in place. And so you can do it all with one long piece of yarn and just kind of weave in your end here and then weave through here and then secure. It doesn't have to be done in every single strand, just as long as it's kind of snaking its way up. That will absolutely guarantee that this will not move. So that's one option, especially if you want to leave your ear warmer nice and simple with just the braided effect like that. So there is a little bonus option I'm going to show you at the end of the video, so stick around for that. But for now, let's finish this off. I'm going to assume that you would have woven in and secured down your braid. Don't you just love how that looks so complicated, but it was so easy to make. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we just need to sew on our buttons and we are good to go. So what I want to do is you want to bring this around and just place your end here where you think it will go. And the beautiful thing is this has already created its own buttonholes with those chain twos we did at the beginning and the end there. So I just want to kind of place it somewhere central. Want to even out. So that looks like a good spot. So basically just eyeball it. Now remember we had 6 stitches. So where it's sitting, which is beautifully, is on stitch 3 and 4. So you'll have 2 stitches on each side. And these buttons are small enough that they can sit just nicely like that. So this button is going to cover stitch 3 and over to 2. And then the other button will cover stitch 4 and 5. Okay. So I don't need to go over this with you. It's the same thing we just did with our darning needle. The difference is you're going to have to make sure that you're using a regular thread and needle. You see how thin that is? So you can use, I mean, if you have red yarn, you can go to town with that. I just happen to have black and I have black buttons, so it's not going to be too big of a deal. But the reason why we want that thread needle is see how small those buttonholes are? And so that needle will go right through. Okay, and you're just going to kind of go up and down as you go in and out. Okay, so actually, since I have this here, I'll just quickly show you to get started in case you are a little bit green on hand sewing. So that's stitch 1, 2, 3. I'm going to place my button here over 3. And now I'm going to kind of just start from the bottom. And I just want to make sure that my needle pokes through one of those holes there. And I feed it up. And I leave a bit of a tail at the end because I'm going to tie that off. And then all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go across the way and go down. Whoops. And pull that through until the until the thread is snug. Now be careful because it's easy to get your thread tangled because it's so thin. Okay, and then I just keep doing that a few times. See, I'm popping back up there in the same spot. I come back up, pull it snug. Once you get in and out a few times, it'll be super easy. And then go down through there. And then this time I'm going to come up through that one there. Okay, and then I go across the way. Whoops, I didn't actually come up through there. I'm going to go back down. So now I'm feeling, see, that button's already fairly secure. And then this time I want to come up through, there we go. That's the hole I want to come up through. And this time I'm going to go across to the other side. Now I like to do this a lot of times just because I'm just the type of person who likes to make sure things are super, super extra secure. So that is what I'm going to do for both buttons. Okay, so I think you get the idea. See, that button's now nice and secure. And then when I'm done, see that tail? I'm just going to tie them, knot them a few times, and then snip my thread. Okay, super easy and straightforward. So go ahead and do your buttons and you're just about done. Okay guys, so here we go. We've got our buttons done and our braided headband is complete. Okay, so you see, so easy, but it looks really, really intricate. Now, you might go, what happens if this gets really stretchy? It's too loose. Well, the beautiful thing about this is all of these spaces here are perfect for buttonholes. So if your headband starts feeling a little bit loose, instead of fastening it at the end, maybe you're going to go in a few stitches, just like that. Okay. And now all of a sudden, your headband is feeling a lot more snug. Whoops, I put that in the wrong buttonhole, but I think you guys get the gist of where I'm going with that. Whoops. Okay, so that's what I love about this price. I still put it in the wrong buttonhole. Oh, yeah. But I think you guys know where I'm going here with this. So that's a beautiful thing about a project like this is it's totally customizable and adjustable. So if the person has a slightly smaller head, they can fasten it down a bit more, or a larger head. Now, based on that, if you think that there's going to be some major adjustable issues, what I would do is I might actually put some buttons along the inside so that you can then hide that extra flap if you think that that's if they're gonna use up a lot, right? But all in all, this is how easy it is, okay? So I'm just gonna fasten that off there, and you can see from our little clip there that it sits beautifully on the head. It does not disturb your hair, which is a major priority. And it's still super cute, fashionable, keeping your ears warm. And everybody is very happy. So I hope you've enjoyed coming along with me on this week's crochet adventure. And if you have any questions, as always, you can pop me a comment in the comment box down below. Or, as always, you can reach me directly at info@crochetcrafty.com. And as always, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at The Stitch Sessions. And remember, if you haven't pressed that subscribe button, go ahead and do that. And you'll always stay up to date every time I upload a brand new video. Come join me every Wednesday for a fun new crochet tutorial. Thanks so much, everyone. Have an amazing day. Happy crocheting. Take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you guys in the next session. Bye-bye. Now, for those of you that want to add a little extra embellishment to your ear warmer, this is a bonus option for you. So as we discussed before, some people will sew in or sew down their strand so it stays secure. You can do this also with an added trim embellishment. So I'm just going to show you what that is if you'd like to add this as an option. So again, just make sure everything is sitting nice and even. Make sure that all of them are evenly kind of spread out. It's very easy for this one down here to get super tight and this one to get extra loose. So just kind of spread them out, make sure that visually they're nice and even for you. And then you might want to stretch them this way so that it stretches all together. So we're going to grab our yarn, and I'm actually going to go down a hook size. I'm going to go down to a 6.5 millimeter hook. I don't think you can see that there. 6.5 millimeter, also known as a K or 10.5. And I just want it to make a little bit of a tighter stitch. So I'm going to just place a slip knot on my hook, and we're going to do a very dainty little trim and secure this along the way. Okay, so I would start in the very first stitch right there, and I'm going to slip stitch to join. Just like that. And then I'm going to chain one, and I'm going to go right away into the very first stitch down here. So this one, I'm just going to go into the back loop only, and I'm going to single crochet. Okay, then I'm going to chain 2 and single crochet into the next back loop. Okay, so I'm going to chain 2 again. Now don't worry that this is stretching out, it will relax once we are finished with this. We're going to go into the next stitch, into the back loop only, and single crochet. So you can see those chain 2s are bunching up and it's creating a pretty little ridge effect. So we're going to go into the next one there, back loop only. Whoops. Sorry, whoops, I got to chain 2, 1, 2, and then go into the back loop only of the next one. And now this is where I can see that my next strand is butting up there. Okay, so now I would continue on. Again, I always want to keep making sure that it stays nice and even, because once you stitch these together, if they're uneven, it'll be kind of wonky. So now I'm just going to continue on. So once I can see that I'm butting up against my next strand, what I'm going to do is I am going to go into the back loop of the closest one to me and I'm going to slip stitch. And that is going to secure it down. Then I will chain 2 and go into the next stitch right next to it, back loop only, and single crochet. Okay, so what that slip stitch does, it helps to keep the general shaping of the braid. See how it has all these really funky loops? And it keeps the integrity of it going. Okay, so then I always want to keep kind of smoothing it out and stretching it, make sure it's all nice and even. Now I continue into the back loop. Whoops, I've got to chain 2, so between each single crochet I'm going to chain 2, single crochet, back loop only, chain 2 into the next one, back loop only, and chain 2, back loop only, single crochet. Now I'm getting close to that next one, so again I'm going to put my work down. I'm just going to make sure it's actually sitting evenly, and then I will find the closest one and I'm going to slip stitch into the next one here, just like that. Okay, now sometimes what I might do, if I really want to kind of make it feel super secure, see how this one's kind of nestled here? I'll go into that one and I'll pick up the back loop as well, or of the back strand, and slip stitch there. That'll make me, see, that makes me feel a lot better about that. Okay, then I chain 2 and I continue on, single crochet. So every time I come across 2 strands that are butting up against each other, whoops, chain 2, 1, 2. Every time I come across 2 strands that butt up against each other, I want to slip stitch them together. Okay, so let me just take this out. So now you can see that it's adding just this extra texture around the sides. Not only that, it's also adding a little bit of extra width to it. So if this was just covering your ear, then this is going to give you just a little bit of extra width. And it also gives it that additional, almost like a vintage rustic vibe. I really like it. So you have that option, and it also secures it together. So you've got a lot of really pluses and bonuses there. It'll beef up the look of your braid, secure your strands, and make it look really sweet. Or you can opt to keep it very simple, very traditional, and just keep it with no trim, and perhaps just do a few stitches in between each strand. Okay, now you would keep going if this is what you want, the route you want to take. You would keep going all the way to the end. You can certainly do it up to the strand here, around. You would just keep stitching around and continue on all the way until you come back down to your buttonholes. And I would I would just slip stitch at the end and snip your yarn. I wouldn't necessarily go and do another row across, but again, totally up to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and finish mine and then show you what it looks like at the end. And here it is, finished with the trim, and it definitely looks very vintage and super cozy. And it just gives it, like I said, it just gives it that extra, little bit of width, and it's got this beautiful texture, extra texture. I mean, this thing is already textured. And then the strap is just a little bit thicker there. So yeah, I just did single crochets across here. I kept it fairly neutral because I didn't want it to get too busy. And then I slip stitched across here, and I continue with the single crochets and then back to singles and chain twos. I am super happy with how that came out, guys. So you can just kind of fasten it here, and you are ready to rock it any winter day and still look super cute with your ponytail, updo, what have you, and it'll keep you nice and toasty warm. So hope you enjoy your cozy ear warmer, and I look forward to seeing what colorways you guys chose for your braided ear warmer. So don't forget to tag me on Instagram at The Stitch Sessions, okay? All right, guys, until our next crochet adventure, I'll see you guys in the next session. Take care.